The practice of embodying emotion, it's a method, and it's the core clinical strategy in integral somatic psychology. An emotion is, you can think of it as an energy. The more we block it from more places in the body, the more it will concentrate in a few places in the body. And that creates a great deal of stress. If you only believe that all of the things are, experiences are coming, including awareness, are coming from this body, you're not going to allow your awareness to expand beyond that to explore new possibilities. It's a self-imposed prison. Western mindfulness practices are often about subject and object, whereas Eastern mindfulness goes one step further to separate the awareness from the sense of self.
Welcome to the Sensing Mind podcast, where you can listen to in-depth interviews with leading psychologists, therapists, scientists, and thinkers who are operating at the crossroads of cognitive science, psychotherapy, and spiritual traditions. I'm Claus Springborg, the host of the podcast and the founder of Sensing Mind Institute. Sensing Mind Institute is a school that offers educational programs in being-centered therapy, an approach to therapy that seeks to bridge science and spiritual traditions. If you enjoy the podcast and you would like to support it, you can do so by sharing it with others, by leaving a review, or by liking it and following it on your preferred platform. Thank you for listening, and now let's get to the interview. Welcome to this podcast. It is a privilege to have you here and have the opportunity to talk to you and ask you some more questions about your work. So,
Thank you.
You are Raja Selvam, and you are a clinical psychologist. You have trained in multiple modalities, body-oriented modalities of therapy, including somatic experiencing and bodynamics. You are currently teaching in all over the world and have been doing so for more than 30 years.
Yeah.
And then you are the developer of the Integral Somatic Psychology and author of a bestselling book, which is, just to be sure to get the title right here, The Practice of Embodying Emotions, a Method for Improving Cognitive, Emotional, and Behavioral Outcomes. And it is, for now, out in 12 languages.
12 languages, including English, the original.
Including English, yes, the original. And so I was thinking maybe a good place to start is to ask you to give an introduction to what is integral somatic psychology, and maybe include some of what were some of the key insights that led you to develop this system.
Yeah. Let me start with what the book is, and then I can broaden it into a broader definition and understanding of integral somatic psychology.
Wonderful.
Because the practice of embodying emotion, it's a method, and it's the core clinical strategy in integral somatic psychology. What does it mean? That would be a question. Yeah. What does it mean to embody an emotion? Yeah. It is simply this. To expand the conscious experience of the emotion to as much of the body as possible. A concrete example. You have fear in the chest. To broaden the experience of the fear to more of the chest and perhaps to the belly, perhaps to the throat, to the face. As much as possible is important because it's not possible to expand it to the whole body, even though theoretically it is possible. It is neither necessary nor always possible. Yeah, why would one do that? Yeah, why would one do that? If after all people are coming to us and saying, "I have grief, I would like relief from it."
Yes.
I have anxiety, I would like to have relief from it. Yeah, and I've tried different things, and I heard that you work with emotion, and that your method can to work with emotion in a very efficient way. And so why would one do that? You're telling me to expand the anxiety or the fear that often causes an anxiety attack in me. Yeah. So let me explain this. An emotion is the impact something has on us, a situation has on us. I'm about to lose a job, or I'm thinking that, Donald Trump will get elected president again, and what it implies for the world and the United States, the country I love. Yeah. So I have a reaction, right? Fear, anxiety. And I cannot come to terms with it. Yeah. It's an ongoing situation, and it affects my sleep. At times, I'm even on the verge of panic. Some people are, I'm not, but to give you an example. So why would I expand it to more of the body? The reason is this. What we tend to do when we have an unpleasant emotion, we tend to defend against the experience by shutting the body down. For example, by tightening the breathing muscles, for example. We would like to eliminate it from our experience, but often we are not able to. That is why we continue to suffer, from the partial presence of concentrated emotions in some places in the body. An emotion is, you can think of it as an energy. The more we block it from more places in the body, the more it will concentrate in a few places in the body. And that creates a great deal of stress. It's like trying to lift a 50-kilogram bag with just one arm as opposed to both arms on your hip, etc. It's easier. So that is something that we do. We've learned how to do, or it's innately in us, the ability to shut the body down, to get rid of the emotion altogether if possible. But if you cannot get rid of it, we try to concentrate, block it, to limit it to certain places without realizing that it is actually causing us more problem, than offering a solution. So what we do is, then you can think of it, work with the defenses, constriction, etc., expanding the breath or touch, and so it expands. And what people often say, when they say, and now I feel it here, it's very interesting. It is not so difficult here. I still feel fear here. But overall, my overall suffering is not as much. So I can be with it longer. Yeah, that is the practice of embodying emotion. And the reason we know why this works is because there is scientific research, recent research, that shows that when we block the body from being involved in emotion, the brain does not process the situation well. The thinking gets diminished or compromised. Ideas about how to deal with the situation, is reduced. And the emotional processing is also reduced. We can see that in the brain scans of people going through experiments in which they're deliberately forced to block emotional experience, for example, from the face or the body. Yeah. So when you expand it, what happens is that it becomes more tolerable by the law of distribution. And I can be with it longer. Emotion is information. And the brain can be with it longer, process it more clearly. And I might have cognitive solutions, behavioral solutions, or I might just get to a place where it's okay that I remain anxious till the election in November. It's okay. Everybody is going through it. It's okay to be with it. It's not causing me lack of sleep.
Yes.
Yeah, something like that. So that is the strategy. That is a strategy. And the book, is quite scientific in that it just works with, talks about how to, in a step-by-step way, find the emotion in a situation, find it in the body and expand it in the body using different techniques. Yeah, all within the realm of science. But the integral somatic psychology itself goes beyond that, because integral somatic psychology recognizes, using Eastern research on the body, through phenomenology, that there are more levels of our body, or more bodies, if you will, that contribute to that emotional experience and its regulation. So what does that mean? It turns out that here's this body. It has body parts we can see and measure, etc., like bones and cells, etc. But if you go deeper into the cells, it becomes atoms, subatomic particles, etc. Those are levels we cannot measure. But we can be aware of it because it's subject to our awareness. But then we also have another body, what in the East is called the subtle body, that leaves this body upon this body's death. Yeah. And then quantum physics tells us that both bodies ultimately, if you drop down to the subatomic level of who we are, there is no boundary between me and you, and between me and the lamp and the couch. It's just one soup of subatomic particles, which then somehow aggregates and congeals into this form here, me, and that form, you, there. But really, there is only one thing, the universe, right? And how does that contribute, that level of the body, contribute to my experience and its regulation? And there's yet another level of the body that phenomenology has arrived at, and science is also holding it as a possibility, because science can only go so far, because science's ability to measure things, big or small, is very limited. But then what phenomenologists have found, Eastern phenomenologists have found through their awareness, is corroborated by Western quantum physicists as plausible. It doesn't contradict it. So how do we use every level of our body that is contributing to experience, right, to increase the ability to tolerate emotions, pleasant and unpleasant emotions, in the limited body that we have? The body, that is called the individual gross body in Eastern psychology. Yeah, ultimately, we have come here to have some experience through this body. That's primary. Yeah, but then to forget that there are other bodies that are also contributing to it, its regulation, to its resource, etc., is to then to work with a very narrow definition of oneself. So integral somatic psychology also has methods and models for working with other levels of who we are, including the level where we are each one of us is the same basis of absolute pure awareness that doesn't change.
Yes.
Yeah. So and so integral somatic psychology, because it works with all levels of the body. Mm.
So I'm curious, this is very interesting. So, and I know that what you're talking about now, sometimes you refer to it as the one body problem, the idea of thinking that there is just
One
body, instead of, you can say, expanding our concept of what is the body. So before you talked about how working with embodying emotions, one way of working with embodying emotions is to feel it throughout the physical body.
To increase the presence of the emotion.
Yes.
Or to make sure that not many places are blocked from it. And how do we know that not many places are blocked from it? Only through its presence.
Yes.
That's how we do it.
So I think most people who work with therapy can recognize how working with the breath, in order to expand where in the body it's possible to feel the presence of an emotion, and how that has positive effects. But I'm curious, the other bodies you're talking about, how does that translate into practical interventions when you're sitting in the therapy room?
Yeah, we need to have a model of the subtle body. There are many models of the subtle body.
Yes.
And, we use one model that's quite basic. And the reason why we want it to be basic is because we want to teach them all of it in 12 days.
Okay, ambitious.
Yeah, ambitious. It's possible if you simplify it. And so we are not requiring people to sense all these other bodies. That takes years to do. That's not necessary. For example, if you want to work with acupuncture, you want to become an acupuncturist, you don't have to sense the meridians. You just need to know where the meridians are in the body so you can put the needles there. Neither the client nor the therapist needs to sense the flow of energy in along the meridians. So we can work with it the same way. I'll give you an example. For example, we know that the ether element, that according to this model, flows into the subtle body and then into the gross body through the throat chakra. Yeah, it has certain qualities, and that is, if you mobilize the ether element and distribute it in the body, then you can expect this body, the final body, to have certain experiences. These qualities are, for example, calmness, spaciousness. I'm talking about experiences in this body. Spaciousness, calmness, tranquility, lightness, and peacefulness, and so on. Now, if one is stressed, let's say one has post-traumatic stress disorder from the war, a quick way, we can try to regulate the body and through that the brain, or regulate the brain directly. All of that we do in Integral Somatic Psychology. These are things that I talk about in the first book. Or you can actually work to mobilize and distribute the ether element from the subtle body in the gross body. And how do you do that? And it turns out that you can do it very easily. For example, you join two places in the body that mediates the ether element. For example, if I were to do this, the joints of the arms and the legs, or I do that, right? Or I do that shoulder and the wrist joint. If I do that and sit with it and look for these qualities of experience in the body, I'm not looking for the ether element. What does that feel like? That I'm not interested in it. I'm interested in what effect it produces in my brain and body, right? You will feel calmer. You will feel calmer. You will feel more spacious. And to feel more spacious, the tension in the muscles, have to go down. To feel calm, the brain has to calm down. But that you can bring about just by working with the ether element. And there's a concrete way of working with it, because there's a subtle body map is superimposed on the gross body, and you can work with it. Another typical problem in psychotherapy or life, for example, when I have an unbearable emotion, I tend to do what? I tend to push the heart energy, it's called air, up. I try to close my heart, but of course I cannot close it because I still see my ex-girlfriend across the street in her apartment walking around. So So I get triggered, or I have memories, right? I would like not to forget her, but here it is. So I suffer. I'm hurting. So then the heart is open and I hurt. I don't know what to do. I try to prevent this emotion from spreading to the rest of the body to create. So what I do is I try to push it back. I cannot. Then I try to push it up. So it goes here. So I have pain and thoughts, etc. But it's incomplete. So in order to get over her, I need to feel the feeling. I know it's over. That's clear, If it's not over, then I'm trying to get it back. That's a whole other story. But it's over, right? And I also know that she's not good for me. She has treated me badly. I need to let her go, but I cannot. I continue to hurt. So you need to feel the hurt, the grief fully. How? to as much of the body as possible. But then, by habit, going back to my childhood, this energy gets pushed up. Yeah, and then I'm suffering here and suffering there, and I'm trying to constrict everything here. So what do? You need to mobilize this energy, and then expand it in the body, so that you can feel the grief more throughout the body, the hurt more throughout the body. So it's not hurting my heart so much that it feels like the heart would stop. So how do you do that? So you can do that by putting a hand here and a hand here. These are two important places for the heart chakra energy of air to distribute. Or I can put my hand here in the lower leg, so that the energy gets more evenly distributed. And then the hurt and the grief becomes more bearable here. I can breathe, it can get more open, and the energy can get more distributed. It's this energy that air element moves the whole subtle body, and the subtle body stimulates the gross body to have experiences. In this case, we're talking about emotion. So it gets distributed, and it's a very quick thing to learn. So these are not so esoteric. They can be learned quickly. Of course, if you want to feel these energies and do more sophisticated work with them, then of course it's going to take more time and experience. But it can be done so easily. But it's not something that you can measure scientifically. You can measure the impact it has on the person. For example, I worked with a woman who just suffered from so much shame, existential shame, and that she cannot put herself out there professionally. Yeah, I worked with her. We worked to distribute using the air element. We also use the ether element to make the experience more regulated. And we've just worked with feeling awful about feeling bad about oneself, that one wants to hide, and expressing it, etc. And then she just wrote to me and said, I'm moving on with the website. I don't suffer from as much shame, so much shame that it prevents me from making the steps that I need to make in order to continue to move forward. So you get the idea.
That's wonderful. Yeah.
So you can work expansion, regulation, we call it. The defenses are there in the gross body. That's what we're interested in, right? But you can do it, work with it at the level of the bones and the muscles, but you can work with the level of the subtle body, the elements, and to bring about changes in the body, in the gross body.
So this is a concrete way in which you can draw on other bodies in a therapeutic situation. One thing that pops up, and you say it doesn't sound too esoteric. I think for some it might sound quite esoteric.
I'm sure that does.
Yes.
Especially when they hear it's coming from the East.
Yes. But I'm also curious about, when I hear that, then I'm curious about, because you say the way that you can measure it is by measuring outcomes. So you see it has positive effects on people.
You cannot measure, science can only measure so much. When things get small or things get big, like subatomic particles or let's say solar systems, you know how much difficulty we have. So it's not, however, it is all subject to awareness. And let me expand that. I would say it's all subject to your awareness. Therefore, you can verify it for yourself.
Okay, so I'm curious about that because I think, so one of the things you talk about is exactly that you can verify it for yourself through developing awareness.
Or using your awareness.
Or using your awareness.
Because your awareness is already there.
Yes.
It just needs to be used.
It needs to be used. What's the it that you can become aware of or verify for yourself? What is the kind of knowledge that you can verify for yourself, would be useful to verify for yourself?
For example, that the world I see outside is in my awareness. Without it, I will not know that. It's true that I observe the world through my five senses, but the five senses data is in my awareness ultimately. So just becoming aware of it, verify it for yourself.
Yes.
Right? And verify that your body, you can observe it through the five senses, but you can also internally sense it through the nervous system, interoception. But ultimately, it is also in your awareness. And then you can go one step further. Your thoughts, your memories, etc. Right? How do you know that you have these? It's only through your awareness. Right?
Yes.
What about your sense of self? Exactly. So it's quite an easy thing. Who am I? Who am I? Who's sitting here? I would say, of course, it's me. What a stupid question that is. Exactly. You know that. But that is also in your awareness. And neurology, neuroscience says that is a product of experience. It is not the agent that is bringing about the experience.
Yes.
Yeah. And therefore, you know this. So you just notice that. So ultimately, everything is in your awareness, including yourself. And this awareness, if you continue to refine this practice, you will notice that this awareness is everywhere. I mean, I've gotten there because I practice. It's everywhere. Everything is in my awareness. I'm sure that it is true for you too. It's the same awareness, right? So the whole world is in my awareness.
Yes.
Yeah. What about the world that I don't see? How do you know that the world is out there? That is also in your awareness. What is absent, what is present is also in your awareness. So it's everywhere. So that is the refined. And then what is the nature of this awareness we can talk about? I can quickly get there. It is the basis of the universe. It is the unchanging, unlimited basis of the universe. That's what it is, right? That is what people call enlightenment.
Yes.
Enlightenment. Now, you'll say, why are you going all the way there? In part because what is psychology about? Psychology about development. Why not develop all the way? But not only that, just knowing that I have these levels of my being makes it easier to live my life here, to process my life here. Yeah. Yeah. And one thing I would add, then you would ask, why do you then, work with suffering in the body? Right? That's a good question. It's a good question. It turns out that we have come here to have certain experiences to continue to develop ourselves, our souls. And the way we do that is by developing a capacity for opposites. It's through developing a greater capacity for opposites in experience, pain and pleasure, that we not only develop as human beings. Yeah. Compassion does not come unless you have capacity for suffering, right? Otherwise, you're in reaction. But this knowledge of who you are on different levels of your being, so to speak, is easier when you have a greater capacity for opposites. That's why on almost all serious spiritual paths, they require that you develop a capacity for opposites, either in therapy or through life. Yeah, but it goes both ways. You can strive in that direction. That will help you to develop more experience, capacity of experience, to grow your soul on the one hand, but it can also, developing greater capacity of experience also helps you to discriminate your awareness and all levels of your being. Does it make sense? It's
Yes.
it goes both ways. So
Very interesting. So let me just go back to what you're talking about, this developing awareness of pure consciousness or the absolute. So you're describing a relatively simple practice in terms of how to describe it, maybe not in terms of how to carry it out, but in terms of describe it, where you say you see all things, and then you can notice that everything you see, it's all in the eye, but where is the eye and the other senses? It's in the awareness. And that goes both for the external world and for the internal world.
Including your sense of self.
Including your sense of self, yes.
But Western mindfulness often stops, the Western mindfulness practices are often about subject and object.
Yes.
Whereas Eastern mindfulness goes one step further to separate the awareness from the sense of self.
Yes, if it's
subject is broken into awareness plus a sense of self.
Yeah. So I'm curious about two things. One is if you should summarize, what is the therapeutic effect of developing that awareness? Why is that interesting to develop as part of a therapy session?
I often use a simple technique, and this becomes a subject of hot discussion.
Wonderful.
And the technique is this. Let's say somebody is really anxious as hell.
Mm-hmm.
And they might even panic. And so I often say there are many ways to regulate that. For example, I can connect two zones of an element in the subtle body, distribute the energy, or to have them hold the brain or the heart, etc. There's so many ways to regulate, make an experience more bearable, and or to have the person express it, etc. But there's a simple way I can also do it. I can say, using this multi-level understanding of the psyche, I can say, notice that you're having a great deal of difficulty with anxiety right now. And that it's in the body. That's where it is difficult. And I say, make the statement without thinking about it. My body's anxious, I am not.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Yes.
And that immediately calms the person down to some extent. That they can be with the experience, they get more regulated, and they often, it does not always work, it's a technique, right?
Yes.
So, in which case I might have them do the work with the brain and make the statement, And what usually happens is the experience gets more regulated, and the experience in the body becomes more tolerable. And what have I made use of? I made use of the truth of who you are. That when I'm there are three levels of suffering, and I'll explain what they are. And it's not my theory; it's Buddha's theory. Buddha. So the first level of suffering is conditioning in the body. Repeated, stimulus response, conditioning in the body. That's what body psychotherapists somatically can work with. Or I can work with the subtle body and try to change the conditioning in the body. The second level contribution to suffering is my reaction to the suffering. Right? Sometimes people say it's the mind's response to suffering. Right? But we saw today that you cannot really separate cognition, emotion, behavior. So let's say one's reaction to the suffering, that I have a reaction, that's a product of conditioning, right? And I also have a reaction to that. Oh, it is happening again. I'm so unfortunate. That reaction is a secondary cause of suffering.
Yes.
Can be. You can reduce it too. It can be say, oh, suffering comes and goes. That's a different conditioning. It's a response that doesn't add to the suffering. In fact, it might counter it, right? But the third level of suffering is the identification with the body. That awareness combines with the sense of self in this limited body and says, I am my body. And therefore the suffering is there. So when I say, my body is suffering, I'm not, what am I doing? I'm separating the body, the two levels of conditioning. My body, because after all, both conditioning, the initial response that's due to conditioning and the reaction to that, they're all a product of the body. They're all happening in the body. So when I say I'm not suffering, my body is, I'm pushing everything, including the sense of self, to the position of object. And I'm aligned with the awareness, at least temporarily, for a few seconds. And that is enough to bring about a change.
Yes. Yeah. Why is that enough to bring about change? It's very interesting, right? Because it seems
To start with.
Yes.
Then I notice that it becomes more bearable. I mean, things become more bearable. My secondary reaction to it is less strong, but I can process it.
Yes, I was just about to say, it seems that both when you are talking about allowing the emotion in more parts of the body, you say then it becomes more bearable, and then you have the possibility to process the information. And it sounds like here you also say, by making the distinction and saying, well, there's the body that's experiencing different things, and then there's the awareness which can witness this, but you are not the body.
When you say that I'm not, you're identifying with the awareness.
Yes.
And ultimately, you're the awareness.
Yes.
That is the basis of the universe. That is unaffected by the universe. That's the paradox. That only you can verify through your experience. No scientist can measure it or show it to you.
Yes. So now I have two questions at the same time.
Yes.
But it seems like by embracing the truth of who you are, you can make the experience more bearable, and you can make it more possible for you to process the
Exactly.
Yes.
Exactly. We use to process the experience, but in psychology,
yes,
psychotherapy, we're interested in processing the experience.
Yes.
Right? We're not interested in going away.
Exactly. So that brings me to another question. So multiple times you've said this thing that you can verify things for yourself, but that science cannot measure it. But you also talk about how this knowledge, one way of this knowledge being produced is through phenomenology. So phenomenological inquiry. So that means paying attention to your own lived experience.
Exactly.
And I'm thinking, if you look at science and say the defining factor of science is measuring, through using, for example, different forms of apparatus.
Right.
Then we talked about how certain things are easy to measure, certain things are very hard to measure. For example, in the galaxies, very difficult to measure things. When you come to the subatomic particles, the smaller things you measure, big challenges emerge. And this, of course, when you talk about personal lived experience, also, I don't even know where to begin to measure it. But if you think about science as a rigorous practice of exploration, adding the possibility of falsification and leaving measurement out of it, would that be an approach to science that could be relevant in the phenomenological inquiry?
In fact, I've read that there are quantum physicists who are saying that we have exhausted the limits of scientific inquiry through measurement. We have to use refined awareness, through which the Eastern phenomenologists have arrived at self-understanding, not only understanding the world, self, and the relationship between the two.
Yes.
So, yeah, they can use it. They can use it. But first, they have to be willing to shed the limitation imposed by assumption that only things that can be measured are true. Let go of the limiting belief that awareness is a product of the brain.
Yes.
And be open to exploring and finding what it is and what can come to know about it. Because if you only believe that all of the things are experiences are coming, including awareness, are coming from this body on a limited level, at the level of neurons or something like that, then of course you're not going to allow your awareness to expand beyond that to explore new possibilities. It's a self-imposed prison.
Yes. So this is what you also talked about in your talk today, that we have the reductionist view that consciousness is a product of the brain, and where people like David Chalmers, who proposed the hard problem of consciousness, which is the question of how can, basically he says the hard problem of consciousness is how is it possible that physical states in the brain give rise to conscious experience? How can the firing of certain neurons give rise to your personal experience of the color blue?
Right. The awareness of the color blue.
Yes, exactly. Because in principle, you could say the whole system could operate without having any conscious awareness. It doesn't seem to add anything on the physical level that's necessary for the survival of the organism.
Right.
So why is that?
That's the good question. To find out the answer, only your awareness is a guide.
Yes.
And the benefit of the discoveries of so many other people ahead of you for thousands of years.
See, but this is where I'm thinking, why is that not science? Right? Why is it not? So you have people for thousands of years who explore things using the measurement instrument of their own awareness.
Yeah.
And you can stand on their shoulders. You can continue and explore that.
And verify it for yourself.
Verify it for yourself and add to a body of knowledge. Why is it we do not call that science?
Because we define science as something we need to be able to measure objectively. That is why.
So you think that the as long as we say science is something that you have to measure objectively, meaning through measuring instruments that is not your own awareness, then it cannot be science.
It cannot be science. So it's a definition. By definition, you're ruling it out.
Yes.
When serious scientists, who at the edge of the scientific discovery, people who are at the limits of scientific inquiry, like Erwin Schrödinger,
yes,
who are looking at these findings in by Eastern phenomenologists, right, and saying, this is it. We cannot prove it through science as we define it, but we can definitely go their way and see whether it's verifiable for ourselves, at least, but not dismiss it as esoteric, spiritual, religious, and so on.
Two things. One is, as science progresses, so does techniques of measurement. So in principle, I don't see anything that would prevent science from embracing refined awareness as a measuring instrument. Of course, if that is then you can't. But like, for example, David Chalmers, who now says maybe there are multiple options, right? So the idea that consciousness is an epiphenomena of the brain is one, and I think there's serious.
Or it's more like everything is an epiphenomenon of consciousness.
Exactly, that's another
Easterners
possibility. And I think in Eastern traditions you have different things. Some people would say that consciousness and the physical arise together.
Yeah.
So some would say that consciousness is like time or space is just another
aspect,
the thing that is completely separate from the physical.
Well, you can find out for yourself.
Yes,
but I believe that the consciousness is the bedrock, the unchanging consciousness,
Yes.
in which everything arises and dissolves without affecting the basis.
Yes.
This is what I believe and know to be increasingly true through my own exploration. Otherwise, I wouldn't be confident about it.
So here's a question.
Yeah.
Because sometimes what I see in New Age context, they will take beliefs like this or knowledge like this, and they will run with it, but they will do it the way they try to verify it for themselves is not always particularly grounded or rigorous. And this is where I think maybe we can learn something from science not in terms of the measurement techniques, but in terms of the attitude. How do you go about verifying for something for yourself? Maybe that's a good question. What would you recommend in terms of attitude towards exploring your own personal lived experience in order for it to result in verifying this knowledge for yourself?
Well, when we go through such inquiry, we're not doing it in isolation. We have the experiences of thousands of people over thousands of years. So we have a roadmap. We don't have to start from scratch. It's not that I'm going to sit there and say, I'm going to find out for myself a hiking path through this wilderness, when in fact there is an app with all the hiking paths there. Does it make sense?
Yes.
Out of some misplaced sense of pride. So we verify whether that is our awareness also reveals the same structures, same truths about us and the world, etc.
But I could imagine like something that I
So
sometimes...
it's intersubjective verify.
Yes.
Intersubjective verification.
But for example, you tell me when you investigate, then you will find that all the objects appear to your consciousness.
Yeah.
And then you can examine what is that consciousness. And then I could imagine that somebody would...
You cannot examine consciousness.
That's it, right?
Awareness is... this is a basic distinction between Western and Eastern philosophy. In Western philosophy, Immanuel Kant, for example, his philosophy is a bedrock of Western scientific enterprise. Essentially, this is something that Carl Jung, the Swiss psychologist, also had difficulty with. In Western philosophy, subject and object have to appear as a pair. Eastern philosophy, epistemology, etc., the awareness can be there without a subject. And you can intuit that. For example, in yourself, you look at your witness or awareness, right? How do you know it's a witness? Is it an object? It is not.
Yeah.
It's evident to you. So in Eastern philosophy, subject can appear without... subject can be aware of itself, awareness that is, without turning itself into an object. It is not possible in Western philosophy, and that's a big problem.
Yes, even in Western phenomenology.
Yeah, exactly. It's the same thing. So they're not examining, I was telling Professor Colombetti, you're examining experience, taking this observer as a given, but we're saying, look at that observer, it's not so stable. One part of it is going up and down. It goes to sleep, right? When you go to sleep. Whereas one is there the whole time. So separate the two and you will know the truth about who you are, the world is, and so on. So,
yes. Okay, so maybe another question that I'd be curious about is, you say go verify it for yourself. Is that something that can be facilitated, that verification?
Somebody can guide you through it?
Exactly.
Yeah, of course.
But
the verification will take place inside yourself.
Yes. So what would be some of the main ways in which you could guide someone else to develop this knowledge, to verify this knowledge for themselves?
Well, there are different ways in which they do it. One is, reading the knowledge that is already out there. Sometimes all it takes is to know. Hear the truth about yourself. And then you know. Yeah. It's called the path of knowledge, right? You can also go to someone who teaches you. That's the same thing. It's the path of knowledge. And then you can inquire, right, by yourself, along the lines of the practice that I just mentioned. Focus on the I. Focus on the I am. And stay with it. It's a slippery horse, but stay with it. And that kind of practice or some other practice like that, I'm sure that any number of them, can also lead you to awakening or understanding of yourself and the world and the relationship between the two. So these are two possibilities. Well, the first is called the path of knowledge. The second is called the path of practice. Yeah. In India, it's called the jnana. The first is called the jnana yoga. The second was called Raja yoga, meditation through self-inquiry. It's an act of practice. There are two other paths. The third path is that you assume that it is true, and then you devote your life to the service of the whole. Yeah. That's called karma yoga, right? Mother Teresa, for example. And then, of course, there's the bhakti yoga, which often gets Eastern phenomenologists into trouble. You symbolize the whole as something. It can be a dog, right? In Egypt, they did. Right? So there is God, or some other thing, elephant-headed God, or blonde, blue-eyed Jesus in Copenhagen, right? So, and you worship it because you know that it represents the whole, but you become so devoted, you open your heart and cry, the mystical path, right? The bhakti yoga. Yeah. So sooner or later, the four paths will converge. They come together, but people are made differently. And then, so each path, so people might use a combination of these paths. You find yourself becoming more, for example, I find myself becoming more service-oriented. And this is what I want to do. I know that this is how I'm contributing to the whole. And I'm quite content with that. So that's becoming more and more automatically, even though I'm more on the path of knowledge and the path of practice, but this is happening. But then I'm also loving everything, and the space is I'm just touched by the beauty of everything, the carpet here, and I love everything, and people say that they ultimately you love. I'm not love. I just, you can say that I'm love, but, no, then it will make it a thing, right? It just, in the nature, is just, without conditioning, everything is okay. Everything is beautiful. So that also happens automatically. But that's not the primary path. My primary path is knowledge and inquiry. So
you mean for you it's not the primary path, but in principle it could be for somebody.
It could be
a primary path.
It could be, so.
Wonderful. I think this is maybe a good place to round off.
Okay, great.
So I'm curious if people are interested in getting to know more about your work, and where would they go to
They'll go
do that?
to www.integralsomaticspsychology.com. Integral Somatic Psychology is one word, .com. Perhaps you can insert it in the video. And there are trainings, there are workshops and free lectures and courses on the website. And you're from Denmark. I used to teach in Denmark a lot. And now we have an integral somatic psychology teacher, Pernille Forney in Denmark. And you can also find the training there. So
Wonderful. Thank you so much. It has been a pleasure.
thank you. It was very exciting, stimulating. Every time I talk about it, it becomes more real. That's the beauty of it.
I know.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Lovely chat.
Yes.